last week we talked about why the wet-dry filter sucks, and this week we're going to explain why you would use one and where they can be the absolute best filter that you're ever going to get for a stream-based tank. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and we're back in the filter series. We're going to talk about why wet-dry filters secretly can be really amazing. So, to recap, a wet-dry filter is a variant of the sump filter, in which we are, instead of having the water go into a large sump that is more open and has a higher water level, we're keeping a lower water level, and instead of coming into like a filter sock, the initial water is coming into a trickle tray. That usually has some kind of media to catch your particulates in it, to help clean out and do that mechanical filtration. But what it really does is it spreads the water out over a flat plane, and there's a bunch of holes drilled into it that will drop that water down over media, typically bioballs, that are out of the water. Why would you do this? Number one, part of why the wet-dry filter is amazing is there is no filter that is going to give you a higher level of oxygenation in your water than a wet-dry filter. Because of the inherent design of that water trickling through that tray and splashing and going all over these things, it keeps a very healthy, beneficial bacteria colony all throughout all that biomedia. Only the youngest and strongest, most effective bacteria are surviving in the system. But more importantly, because it's exposed to the air kind of constantly, you get the highest level of oxygenation. So as that water impacts and it causes all that stuff, similar to the water movement that we have at the top of our tank, that gas exchange is incredible for creating very high levels of oxygenation in your tank. Now you might be worried if you're like trying to do CO2 in plants that you're going to lose CO2. Yeah, kind of. But if you're doing something like a river-style tank, a lot of your riverine fish come from natural habitats where there's very high oxygen levels. And the wet-dry sump, nothing tops that for high oxygen levels when it comes to your filtration type. So this inherently is probably the absolute best filter method for a river-style tank, because that waterfall effect is going to create this very high level of oxygenation, and then like a normal sump, you're going to go out to probably a DC controllable pump, something that has probably a significantly higher flow rate than any of your canisters are ever going to have, any of your hang-on backs, if you want that super high flow rate, that very riverine system. These are basically perfect for river tanks. They are the best filter for river tanks. Someone will fight me in the comments on that, but that's fine. Second, what can make these really awesome is because of that natural system with the trickle tray, and then you're going into this high oxygenated thing, you don't really have to clean the sump all that often. The most you really need to do is the whatever fine particulate matter, usually some kind of batting that you can get in a mat or whatever that's sitting on top. You just trade that out like once every couple weeks, and it's just a set form. You're literally like, if you do the DIY method, you buy it in big rolls, you just cut, pull it out, put a new one in, done. It takes you minutes tops. I mean, it's very, very fast. And then other than that, the rest of the system stays super clean and just keeps a really healthy bacteria colony going. And like a sump, you can hide some of your equipment. You can't necessarily do some of like the refugium type stuff that in proper full sumps you could do, but you're not choosing this kind of sump for that kind of system. These are very targeted systems designed for. The other part of this is high bioloads. Because of that natural heavy high oxygenation amount and the way that this is designed, you can handle a significantly higher bioload with the media, because you have this huge stack of media, water's trickling over it constantly. It keeps these very active, very aggressive beneficial bacteria colonies going that can consume a ton of your natural waste from your fish. So these end up being really good filtration systems for something like a monster fish, right? So if you're doing like big arowanas, big Oscars, red-tail catfish, peacock bass, all this kind of stuff, this is where wet-dry filters can really shine. They're providing that high level of oxygenation. They require limited maintenance. They can handle a very high bioload for not a huge amount of space, but because it is a sump, you can get an enormous version of these that will handle ridiculous bioloads. I used to have one of these sumps at one point that I got when I bought out an old person's fish room, and the sump was like 120 gallons in this big thing, but it could filter almost 2,000 gallons worth of water. I mean, it's incredible how effective these filters are because of the natural design of that wet-dry system and what that does for highly oxygenated, very, very effective bacterial colonies. Finally, one of the other things that is worth considering with a wet-dry filter as far as a major positive is because of that trickle tray, right? Your water's coming down and it's flattening out and it's getting really wide, and it becomes lots of little amounts of water splashing down. It actually makes very little noise. They're very quiet compared to traditional sumps. For some people, a big turnoff of the sump is the water splashing noise. You'll have some of those people who, like, they'll never want a sponge filter, they'll never want air-driven filtration, they don't want any of these things that cause splashing, loud water noises. They want something very silent. A wet-dry filter is actually incredibly good at remaining silent because you can have the tube that is bringing your water down sit basically dead on top of that trickle tray and spill it out horizontally instead of straight down. But because of the design of the trickle tray, it inherently keeps a little bit of water in it as it's all coming out, and when you balance everything as far as your flow rates and all that kind of stuff is concerned, it makes this filter incredibly quiet because those thin drips that are dripping into all the biomedia, and the biomedia sits fairly high against the trickle tray, there's not a lot of splash sounds. All that media catches all that water as it makes its way down through into the actual full water portion of the system and creates, effectively speaking, no noise. They're very, very quiet. Even the amount of water that you can probably hear moving in the background of this room, if you were doing all of these on wet-dry filtration systems, you would not hear any of this, really. Not if you didn't want to. And because that highly oxygenated water, again, talking about that silence, because you're getting all this oxygenation here in the media, you can run your plumbing to not cause a lot of turbulence at the top of your water system. You can have your water returns be much deeper in the tank, minimizing the noise even further. You can create effectively a completely silently running system compared to almost every other filtration type using a wet-dry. That's a massive benefit. Admittedly, because these are very large filters, right? Even the smallest ones are about the size of a 20-gallon tank. You're probably not going to use a wet-dry everywhere. But when you start dealing with really high bioloads, you want minimal maintenance, you want very high oxygenation in your water, and you want to have a filter that runs almost completely silent. The wet-dry filter is the king. And if you really want that kind of riverine-style tank, this is the other place where it might not be as silent, right? You want some of that water turbulence in a river tank, but that high oxygenation, that high biocapacity, that high flow rate, the wet-dry filter checks all of those in spades. It has it handled. That's why the wet-dry is actually pretty damn amazing if you're using it for the right purposes. And when you are, it gets one of those. Big thumbs up because it works phenomenally well. That's it, gang. I hope you've enjoyed this little dive into the wet-dry filter. It's not a very common filter, so often a lot of people might look at it and be like, why would you ever do that? And hopefully this helps you understand why people love wet-dry filters and where they can be really, really effective. What I want to hear from you is, did you learn something in this video? Something you didn't know about a wet-dry filter? Maybe you've been using one for years and you're like, Bentley, you're an idiot, you didn't mention this. Let me know in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a little thumbs up. Consider sharing it if you got a friend and maybe he's trying to do a river tank, or maybe they want to do big monster fish and they're trying to figure out what filtration method they want. And finally, if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. We do all sorts of conversations, whether it's about equipment, plant tips, generic rainbow fish nonsense. I do all sorts of stuff on this channel, and if you're interested in seeing more, make sure you subscribe, ring the little notification bell. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.